evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. And looks like it's much better. Twitch had a little hiccup, but
Yep, all good.
it seems that we're here, and welcome in Anders and NanoDBA. Glad to have you both. So tonight's episode of Shop Talk, as you can see, it's not quite the full crew or even the most crew, but we do have with us the one and only Mala. So how you doing, Mala?
Good evening, everyone.
We do not have Mike Christensen because we have sent Mike Christensen in an effort to negotiate with the British to ensure that we get the area of the Pacific Northwest up to 5440. So Mike is currently working on that, and when he comes back, I look forward to being able to migrate up to that area. Also, some of you will die from dysentery, but that's fine. That's fine. All right, Shop Talk. Welcome into Shop Talk. It's Monday. We're hanging around. It's after work, and I just need a canoe. I think a canoe might not be enough. You might need a little bit more. You probably need a wagon, and also to be a banker from Ohio. That's the real secret. If you want to win at Oregon Trail, be a banker from Ohio. That's real strats right there. So it's Shop Talk. We talk about Oregon Trail. Sometimes we talk about technical stuff, database stuff. If you have questions about database stuff, drop them in chat. If you have questions about Oregon Trail, I guess you could also drop those in chat. If you have questions about Oregon Trail, the zombie-related spinoff of Oregon Trail, you could drop those off in chat, but I've never actually played the game. So I don't know that I would have very good strategies for that. But we're really not here to talk about video games from the 1980s, as much as I'd like to spend all day talking about video games from the 80s. No, we are here. We have several articles. We have things that have happened. There was news from the front. And in what I would call classic Shop Talk tradition, this first segment, let's call it Slamming a Cloud Provider, an ongoing series. So we have here from Google Cloud this note, a service health note, that, hey, there was an incident. It affected some stuff. It affected a lot of stuff, admittedly. And you might say, well, hey, it's Google Cloud. Look, nobody actually uses Google Cloud, so that's fine, right? The incident began at 10:51 a.m. on June the 12th. I'm not sure. They don't. Oh, times are U.S. Pacific. So U.S. Pacific time, 10:51 a.m. or 1:51 p.m. in proper time. And it ended about 8 hours later, 7.5 hours later. And, some affected locations. Okay, a lot of affected locations. But what happened? What happened? Rollback. Yeah, pretty much. So there, you know what, Mala? This was your article. Do you want to insultingly degrade the operations that happened this time, or shall I take that role and you just play it straight?
So, some of the terminology there went above my head. I didn't understand it entirely. But if you go down further, what they talk about, where is that part? As a safety precaution, that part, a policy change was inserted into, yeah, that, yeah, right. This code change came with a red button turn off that particular policy serving path. That was the issue with this change, that it did not have appropriate error handling, nor was it feature flag protected. Now, that line, that stands out.
Yeah. So, real brief thing here. Additional quota policy checks. We're going to lock you down. We're going to lock down your ability to do stuff. There was a code change. It got deployed out, but it was never exercised during the rollout because it needed a policy change to trigger the code. Okay, I mean that's fine. That's pretty normal. Although you'd hope that you've thoroughly tested it. But don't worry, we have a red button. Now, I mean, as soon as you have a red button, somebody's going to try to push the red button. It's probably not a literal red button, although that would actually be kind of cool, is if there were an actual red button that somebody pushed. But the problem was, well, didn't have appropriate error handling, like Mala said, nor did you have a feature flag to turn it on or off. And without the appropriate error handling, there was a null pointer exception and caused the binary to crash. And you might say, wait a minute, what language are you writing this in that you can that you have null pointers? There aren't that many common programming languages these days where you can actually have null pointers. I mean, you can have null reference exceptions in Java and C#. So arguably those are null pointers. It's just it's a fancy way of, technically it's not a null pointer. It's simply different. It's object reference not set to an instance of an object.
Uh-huh.
Oh, kind of a null pointer. Functional programming snob says, oh, if you wrote that in a functional programming language, you don't have pointers. You wouldn't have null pointers. You don't have the option of something's not there. It's always there. There's always something. Make impossible states unrepresentable. So that's going to be my campaign when I run for president in 2028. Make impossible states unrepresentable. This is why we need Rust everywhere. Rust actually does a pretty good job of this, because Rust is also a safe language in that regard, where you cannot accidentally free memory and then access that memory. So it as well is like Java, like C#, except without a lot of the overhead of Java and C#, where you have that intermediate language, where you have interpretation even after the compilation happens. So it's a lot faster. Okay. If this had been flag protected, it would have been caught in staging. Which then asks, wait a minute, how do you know? If you didn't catch it in staging without the flag, how do you catch it with the flag?
Maybe there would have been a test condition to test the flag.
Maybe, but that just tests that the thing went on or off. Did you not test it in staging that it would actually work? And the answer is no. Obviously, it didn't. But just having the feature flag doesn't mean that it would have activated. It doesn't mean that this thing would have been caught, because you would think that if it's a problem in production, that wouldn't staging have the same problem, because staging is a match of production.
Theoretically.
So that entire sentence just looks like that was a manager who was writing the sentence, and the developers. Now maybe one of the internal developers there would have an answer that, oh, here's the actual reason why. But I think that was something kind of slipped. So long story short, you have the breakdown. I will give Google credit here. There's a lot of detail. They have a lot of information about what happened, what did they do, and what are some of the ways that they're going to prevent this from happening in the future. So you can see this is very long, and in fact, I'm going to drop a link to this in chat. Looks like a lot of smoke and mirrors technobabble. It was definitely committee written by managers. I will tell you that this did not go out from some individual contributor developer. This definitely went out from somebody who was high enough up, because you can see that it affected about 24 or so different services in Google. Reality was it was a badly named Kubernetes container. That would be kind of funny. Actually, it was DNS. It's always DNS. But it affected a lot of services, so you probably had somebody pretty high up writing this report and throwing in enough tech speech. So, I don't know too much more. I have not looked into the details of the who, what, where, when, and why. Although, the only reason that anybody's talking about this, honestly, if it was just Google had a cloud outage in general, it'd be like, well, golly, that sucks for them. Carrying on. But it turns out that Google has at least one customer, which is probably more than Oracle. Porn sites went down. No, Cloudflare went down, because Cloudflare, which drives about 20% of internet traffic, basically they use one of the services in Google Cloud and didn't have an alternative. And so when Google Cloud services went down, 9/10 of the Cloudflare services were still working perfectly. But the one service that you needed to communicate with all those other ones, yeah, that was fried. A limited number of services at Cloudflare used Google Cloud and were impacted. Maybe one service used it, but that one service was the core service that drives everything else. So this is absolutely Cloudflare. The core Cloudflare services were not impacted. And yet none of them were able to serve traffic because this one service that just happens to be tied in with all of your core services was down. So yeah, your core services were affected. Impacted. So this is obviously marketing silly person trying to hedge bets and say, no, it wasn't. Basically what they're saying is it wasn't our code. We weren't the problem. Those yokels over there were the problem. Which, yeah, I mean, that's fair. It was Google Cloud's problem. Google Cloud went down. But then Cloudflare, you're a big company. You got some big boy pants. Again, they drive like 20% of internet traffic through their proxy services. So when they go down, everybody feels it. And they were down supposedly for a very short time. But in reality, it was like 6 to 12 hours before a lot of the service was back up, and a good day before some lagging sites were back. So their core KV service is restored, bringing dependent products back online. So this key value service is what Cloudflare was using, and when that goes down, whoops, which makes me ask the question, why do you not have a backup option, Cloudflare? I mean, this is you are service provider for, not literally a service provider, not an ISP, but you are a major proxy service for a large percentage of traffic, and you have a single point of failure relying on a third place cloud. I mean, that
But
granted,
aren't a lot of companies like that now, Kevin? Like, if you're hosted on one cloud service, inevitably that becomes a single point of failure.
yeah, absolutely. And that's where it seems like it should be a smart idea to say, well, we're going to have multiple clouds. Now, unfortunately, what that means if you have multiple clouds is you're really limiting what kinds of tooling you can use. You really can't use platform as a service.
Right.
But you can use Kubernetes clusters. You can deploy out your own containers, your pods. I know Anders was joking about that. But you can use your own containers and then shuffle those containers around as needed. And that's a second best. But no worse than if your ISP had their cable cut. Yeah, maybe. But, if your company, again, if your company is that critical to the broader internet, you would hope that you're not using one ISP in one location to serve all of your traffic.
Yeah.
That you would have some ability to route around. So
Yeah.
even if one of your data centers has a cable cut, it's okay because there are still 9 others, and you can reroute the affected people to one of the ones so that, okay, you have service degradation for a bit until they get the repair in place, but you at least have alternatives. And yeah, their main problem is using Google Cloud. I mean, I think I'm on my 4th snide comment about Google Cloud, and I don't really care about Google Cloud, honestly. It almost never comes to mind. Alibaba Cloud probably comes to mind more often than Google Cloud. So it could have been Oracle Cloud. Well, no, it couldn't, because that implies somebody would use Oracle Cloud. Oracle Cloud comes to mind more often than Google Cloud, just because I love making fun of Oracle Cloud. Okay. Google now warns that multiple workspace and search services are also affected by this massive outage. Yeah, it happens. So anyhow, that was a lot of. And by the way, here's the Bleeping Computer article that we just went through, because I figured I wanted to get not just this is what Google Cloud said, but here's the impact of it. And Cloudflare was the biggest individual group hit by this, but then everybody else kind of followed on from that because, well, if Cloudflare goes down, a whole bunch of people go down. So this is effectively almost the same level as when Amazon had one of their big cloud outages when East US went down for 12 hours, I think it was. And I think it was S3 buckets, if I remember right. And you found out just how many companies were fully dependent on Amazon services being up. And don't worry, they've got 6 nines of support. Now, when those things went down, if you read the fine print really closely, those other regions were still up, so they count. So we were still up. It's just that you didn't replicate to multiple regions. You only paid to replicate it once because you didn't want to pay 3 times as much money for the same service. And that's really your fault, not ours. Would that be a cloudage? Maybe, but that feels like something for an influencer. Like if YouTube goes down for a week and all the influencers can't do their videos, that's a cloudage. But thank you for the dad joke, Solomon. We appreciate it here on Shop Talk. All right. That was about all I've got for that rant. But don't worry, folks. We have more rant coming. But first, a little palate cleanser. No rant here. This is Aaron Bertrand. So we talked about last time on Shop Talk, Anthony Nocentino and Andy Yoon showed off some of their results from testing the Z standard backup compression that's new in SQL Server 2025. This is Aaron Bertrand trying out some stuff as well. So this is Aaron working on Stack Overflow database backups. And as I recall, Aaron is still at Stack Overflow. But basically, he kind of gives an idea of here's where Z standard comes from, that this is out of Facebook. So it's been around for a little bit. Microsoft is adopting it as another backup option in SQL Server 2025 for a separate type of compression. All you have to say is change the algorithm and your backups just work. Restoration will work, again, 2025 or later, but we're used to that because you can't back up one version of SQL Server and restore to an earlier version. So that's not a problem for anybody. I think we've got that well baked in at this point. But you also have this level, low, medium, and high. And we saw from Anthony and from Andy some benefits from low, and then not really any benefits from medium, and high was just bad. So I wanted to see what Aaron's situation would look like, because in every one of these scenarios, you have to take into mind that this is going to be their hardware, their specific circumstances, their databases, their configurations, their hardware limitations, et cetera, et cetera. I think that Stack Overflow is probably closer to a pretty decent example of here's a fairly normal database, except that Stack Overflow has a lot of large text values. It has all of those questions, it has all of those answers, and that forms a pretty good percentage of the total space used on disk. So even that may not be a perfectly apropos example for perhaps a busy transactional processing system where the majority of data is numeric in nature. But I think it does a pretty decent job. So if we go down, I'm double checking here. Once we get to the actual test, this is what. Oh dear. Oh Aaron. Why you do this to me? So he used a VM in Google Cloud. Well, it must have been one of those days that Google Cloud was up. All right. This was basically his test environment. 20,000 IOPS, 2.4, roughly about 2.3 gigabytes per second throughput. And 20,000 IOPS isn't a lot. That's not great. But, I mean, it's better than schlubby, like, blob storage with 2,000 IOPS because you're on standard tier. But nonetheless, backup 32 files, and he starts with the normal Microsoft Express backup algorithm, the compression algorithm that has been in SQL Server for a long time, and then try it with low, medium, and high Z standard. So this is his database for creating tests, his stored procedure to run the tests, basically performing a database backup, initializing the backup file, formatting it. I mean, we're not going to reuse the backup files. Turning compression on and specifying the compression level and type. He's tracking the time that it took and then also performing a restore, because we would want to know, will it restore faster or slower? And we did not see from Anthony or Andy's tests whether or not it would restore faster or slower with Z Standard versus MS Express. So that's good that Aaron did include this as well. And kind of going down, we can see some of the examples of, well, this is what the query looks like when you run it. Here's some results for the test. And here's the stuff that we actually care about. Prod DBA testing versus sales DBA testing. Oh, them's fighting words. But nonetheless, all right. So we have backup time, and notice this. Notice me. For 3 of these 4, they're almost exactly the same. I mean, for all practical purposes, when you're talking about 2 seconds over the course of 3,000 seconds over the course of an hour, that's not real. That's noise. That's your computer hiccuped. So those are all the same. Backup sizes for Express and low, right about the same. Medium got a nice bump. So that's 300 gigabytes almost, 250 gigabytes. Restore time. This is actually what I was very interested in, because, again, if compression is faster, will the restore be faster? And in these cases, there's no difference. In fact, throw in the high, there's no difference at all in here. You're talking 12 seconds over an hour. It's not going to be consistently measurable. You know, like Andrews mentions here, I have more variance from backup to backup. Absolutely. You're going to have some level of variance just because you don't know what else is happening. This was a blank machine. The only thing running is Aaron's database tests. And even then, I'll bet you there were still some processes that were running during one part of the test that weren't running during another part of the test and had a minor impact on CPU and affected it by 2 seconds. So none of that matters. They're all, for the restore time, I consider all 4 of those the same. The backup time, however, when you're talking about another 200 seconds, I mean, that's another 3.5 minutes. So, yeah, that's a difference. It's not a huge difference, but it's a difference. In a year of Microsoft news, oh yeah, this is only optimized for AMD whatever CPUs, the EPYC CPU series. Would be funny considering how long that Intel had their special optimizations that didn't work with AMD processors, which is a big part of why for so long you got a bonus for buying AMD, in that you could buy like a 32 or 48 core AMD processor and only have to license 24 to 32 cores of it. They had this big discount of, we'll give you extra cores because the AMD processors are so much worse. Those tables have turned, absolutely turned. The modern AMD processors just wipe the floor with Intel processors. And as an AMD fanboy from going back to the 90s, I like that. I'm here for that. Okay. in GCP at least with our current chosen disk. Again, I've got another 3 more knocks on GCP in me today. But basically, for that particular test, no amount of compression was going to make the backups faster. For all we know, Kevin used Cyrix. I did not use AMD during the K6 or K5 line. I had a Packard Bell computer. It was not a good computer. And then we had a Sony that had this magical thing called USB that everybody was going to switch to. It's going to be way better than serial ports. I don't know. That thing didn't really take off now, did it? But the first PC that I built was an AMD Athlon. It was a 600 megahertz processor. It was the big cartridge. And that's how you knew it was good, because look at how big this cartridge is. It's like a Sega Genesis or a Super Nintendo cartridge. So I could put that thing in and look at how much bigger it is than this little tiny chip. And, high school me at the time didn't really realize that that's actually a bad thing. They did that because they needed to. They needed the extra space for the memory, but that's actually slower, which is why we've gone back to little tiny chips. But nonetheless, I've never used a Cyrix. I am not, nor have I ever been, a member of the Cyrix party. Okay. Trace flag 3240. Backup files initially pasted on disk at full estimated size and then populated with data and then shrunk back down. So without that, with trace flag 3042, you don't automatically do that. You just let the backups grow, and backups were about the same size. Disk time took basically the same. So again, using that style of hardware didn't work so well. But then Aaron said, well, I've got crappy disk. How about I get slightly less crappy disk, because it still caps out at 2,400 megabytes per second. And I'm thinking to myself, I might have SSDs, NVMe drives in my PC down here right now that cap out at more than 2,400 megabytes per second. I might have 1 or 2 of those in there right now. Nonetheless, let's get some more IOPS. Hyperdisk Extreme. And it's extreme because it drinks Mountain Dew and it goes to the X Games. You provision IOPS up to 350,000. You can get up to 5,000 megabytes per second. So, that's not terrible. Max IOPS, 20 terabyte drive, unlimited budget. Basically no difference. Fairly typical for Azure VMs running OLTP. Yeah, the 2,400 megabytes per second. I don't know, given the capitalization, if you were doing megabits or megabytes, but it probably is. Pretty much all the cloud providers, they're going to cap you out at the high end right around there. If you have heavier throughput, on-prem storage is going to be better. So again, 2 more Hyperdisk Extreme, and in this case, he has Hyperdisk Extreme on both sides, basically on the SQL Server side and on the backup server side, the host. And now he got the times down to 1,579 to 1,581 seconds. Again, exactly the same. Restore time, slightly higher. It's actually a little bit better for Z Standard Low, but this, you're talking at its peak, 1 minute difference out of, what is that, somewhere around 26, 27 minutes. So 25 minutes versus 26 minutes, basically. And again, that could just be variance. That could just be noise. It might be a little bit more significant. Certainly more significant than like 2 seconds out of an hour. But, still probably not enough to hang your hat on. And so, in Aaron's case, again, Aaron's case may not necessarily be typical of a lot of our environments. And that's why I highly recommend, if you do try out SQL Server 2025, do perform your own tests. Make sure you're not just relying on what Anthony said or what Andy said or what Aaron said. You can go to people whose name starts with B or even C. You can go multiple letters. You don't have to stick with the A's. The A's have some really good people. There's a lot of power in those A's. but there are 25 other letters from which to choose, and you can
Mm.
find other. But even better, you can try it out yourself. It's easy enough. Try it in your own hardware, in your own environments. See if you can find something. And like Andrew says, hey, that size difference might save about $50,000 a month in backup space, and that might be, even if you don't necessarily see a difference in time, that might be worthwhile. Is what I've seen so far typically is people saying Z standard medium. I saw Glenn Allenberry had some informal testing as well. That in his case, low and medium were pretty good, and high was not good. And we saw that with Anthony. We saw that with Andy, where both of them, high was not good. With Aaron's case here, high's doing the same thing. It's a little bit higher in terms of CPU for backup, but he's getting better size and the time is comparable. So that's saying that he's hitting a limit. He's hitting a common limit between the four services. So essentially, in that scenario, in Aaron's case, if he were pushing out to Google, and he had unlimited money, and Google was actually up that day, you could save a few hundred gigabytes per backup, depending on how many backups you have. You're getting into terabytes, dozens of terabytes, hundreds of terabytes a month. That adds up fast. So, like Aaron says, hey, this is a win. From the start, even if it's not necessarily faster, if you can get basically the same speed, and what's really important, restore time. Restore time doesn't really change. Now, you'd hope that restore time would be slightly better with a smaller backup, but it costs CPU to decompress. So, it's okay. But if restore time isn't slower, if backup time isn't slower, and if your backup size is a little bit smaller, that's still better. You're still in a better place. If your backup time is faster and your backup is smaller, hey, better place. If your backup time is faster and your backup size is a little bit bigger, that might be a better place. A lot of it just depends on what are you hurting for. And also, another thing that I'll point out, Aaron didn't really, from what he's got here, he did not really tune those backups. He's using defaults for buffer count, for max transfer size. So he's got multiple files, so that does help. But he's not doing any particular tuning. How common is it to use external compression? I've seen far better results compressing an uncompressed SQL Server backup using RAR with either the better or best compression levels. I don't think it's that common. The reason I don't think it's that common is that you have to have the uncompressed backup first, and then you need to have basically double the file space. So you need, like, let's say you have a 1 terabyte backup that's uncompressed, and maybe it compresses to 800 gigabytes. Well, you need roughly 1.8 terabytes minimum to do that. If you don't have 1.8 terabytes, if you have 1.2, you're not going to be able to compress it. If you have 0.9, you're not going to be able to take the backup. And so I would anticipate probably a lot of companies are doing compression automatically. One of the major exceptions would be if you are writing uncompressed to something like a pure storage array and it's doing deduplication, especially if you have a database that's not rapidly changing. So the problem with backup compression is the same thing with backup encryption. And that is, if you have a minor change, your results, your external results, the file itself can look radically different. So Molly, you say that back in the days of secondary backup to tape, you used to do external compression. I forget the reasons, the name of the system. Was that something like Tivoli? Uh-oh. I said the T word and Mala drops off.
Tivoli, yes. We had an entire team supporting that Tivoli thing.
Yeah. So that I could also see that, because if I remember right, you couldn't compress. Well, those were back in the days probably when SQL Server did not have built-in compression.
Maybe,
because
yeah.
that I don't think came until 2012. I want to say
Maybe, yeah.
it might have been as late as 2014, but
Hmm.
before that we had tools. Idera had their product for taking backups. Redgate had their product for taking backups, and those things would do encryption and they would do compression.
Hmm.
And so before SQL Server had it natively built in, I think Solomon, yeah, you did have a lot more people doing external, like after the fact compression, but that's because
Right.
they may have been using third party tools, Tivoli, like in Mala's case, or we used Idera back at my old state job. Other companies have used Redgate. Quest had their
No, what
software.
was that? What was that tool with Quest software? That backup tool? That horrendous thing? Uh,
Oh, I don't remember.
no, it used to restore objects. That was the only reason we used to keep it. It used to be able to pull individual tables out of the backup. Uh, I forget its name. Anyway,
Yeah, I'm seeing if I can pull it up because Lightspeed.
ah,
Yeah, yeah, because yeah, Lightspeed could do that. Redgate could also do that back in the day.
mm,
Idera was just a wrapper for Zip. I think you're right, Anders. I think it was just using Zip. So Solomon was using RAR. The smart cookies might have been using 7-Zip. So if we have 500 gigabytes of backups, the entire 500 gigabytes isn't needed at a single moment. Yeah, if you have 500 gigs of backups across 50 databases. Now, if you have 500 gigabytes of backup for a single database, then you're going to need that. If you have a wider distribution where, yeah, you have 500 gigs of backups total, but your largest
not at
backup's like
any time.
50.
When did SQL Server ever have table level restore, Kevin? No, I can't recall any time when it did.
I think it did. No, I think NanoDB is right. I think it was a very early version, like 6.5 or something. They removed it before I got involved with SQL Server, but
Okay, why was it removed?
because it didn't work very well, is my recollection.
Okay.
So yeah, so Solomon, in your case there, where hey, your largest is 80 gigs, then you have to have, let's say, 150 to 170 gigabytes free to be able to do that. It's similar story to my 1 terabyte example. And by contrast, if you're just taking compressed backups just out of the gate, you don't need 150 gigabytes. You need 70 gigabytes or whatever. Um, so that I could see as a reason. Now, granted, for that, if you told me I have a backups drive with 70 gigabytes free space, I would say we need more space. That's not acceptable. Um, and it's the story really starts making sense when you have larger scale. When you are talking about hundreds of gigabytes or terabytes or hundreds of terabytes, in those scenarios, having trying to allocate, yeah, I need an extra 100 terabytes because I have one giant backup, and I need to be able to take the backup and then compress the backup. So I need twice as much space. That's a harder thing to sell with operations teams. But when you're talking about 80 gigabytes as your largest backup, or as your largest database size, so your database backup will probably uncompressed will be somewhere around 80 gigabytes, depending on free space and blah blah blah. Um, that's a lot easier to say. No, we can just take it uncompressed and then compress after the fact. And like I was mentioning with pure arrays or any type of SAN or storage device that does deduplication, they work better when you don't take compressed backups. They'll just eat those blocks and then say, oh, well, these blocks are the same as before, so I don't have to update anything. And by contrast, when you are compressing, you have, even if very little has changed in the database, the compressed version is quite a bit different. If you have database encryption, the encrypted version is very different. Even if you have a minor change in one field, one column, one row, one table, you're going to have a significant difference in your database, and that's that's going to cause a lot of churn in your appliance. And so that would be why you might run into companies that will say, we would rather have it be uncompressed, unencrypted, written straight out to our appliance, after which point we can compress it, encrypt it, move it into S3, and then have it be unavailable later on when S3 goes down. Because, hey, I'm not just making fun of one cloud. We're going to make fun of all of the clouds. It's what we do here on Shop Talk. So now I have to make fun of Microsoft Cloud. And I guess Microsoft Cloud, I could just say, hey, how's that Fabric going these days, guys? 2 years from now, Fabric is going to be awesome. Give it 2 years. It's going to be awesome. It's hard. Honestly, it's hard.
You're not too sure that the same line is true of AI.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's not true of AI. I'm pretty sure within about 2 to 3 years, generative AI will still have some value because, hey, Eliza was a really cool product. But I think that a lot of the hype will go by and people will say, well, gee, just because you have something that can generate words doesn't actually make it intelligent. And that is a human failing. We have this innate idea that, well, because we generate words, we express ideas using words. So if you use words, obviously you have the ideas. Doesn't always work like that, which is why, the mockingbird, the mimic. The mimic is such a great bird. The parrot. Parrots are so intelligent. Look at how many words the parrot can. Well, parrot. Look at how many words this bird can mimic. It's almost as though I'm having a conversation with it. Doesn't mean the bird actually thinks. I long for the days of low latency on-premises storage. Not impressed with the latency of AWS's IO1 and IO2 storage and disk speed. They are definitely not fast. No cloud provider is particularly fast. You go to like the throw money at them level from Amazon or Microsoft or Google's clouds. You just start throwing money at them and they're like, oh, we can give you something that's almost as fast as an on-premises device that costs a third of the amount for the product versus your monthly fee for our cloud, and is like 90% as fast. Now, granted, it's not going to be 100% as fast, and it's going to be like 70% as fast as if you slapped a bunch of high-end NVMEs laid out appropriately on your PCI Express 5 boards for on-disk, full disk storage. There's no cloud that can pretend to hit that, because even if they buy the same hardware, even if they buy literally the same hardware, you still have to transit over long enough networks. Even if your data center is a mile away from US East 1 or US West 3 or wherever, you still have those network costs. It will still never be as fast as direct attached storage on the device itself. With some of the network and storage engineers and companies, I'll see. I don't know if Anders has taken that in the direction of making it slow. Although, yeah, I can see that. But if you have good engineers who can lay out your network really well, and you're using top end networking equipment, you are doing things intelligently. It still doesn't matter. Direct attached storage will always be faster than internet storage. There is no environment where, with the same hardware, internet storage can compete. The way that they possibly can compete is, there are two ways. I mean, one of them is we want to have failover. We want to have multi-regional replication. Which, yeah, it's great until, we get back to that first article when somebody checks in a bit of code that takes down all of your services. And And by the way, that's happened to Azure as well multiple times. So yeah, it's not a Google thing. It's not an Amazon thing. It's not a Microsoft thing. It's an everybody thing. It's a you thing. Now it's a you problem. And that's case number one is, hey, I want multi-region replicability with checkbox. And number two is, hey, I don't want to be in the business of buying my own hardware, of owning my own hardware, of dealing with that stuff. But I think even that's a bit of a cop-out because you're still going to have to manage it. It's in a cloud, yes. So there are certain parts that you don't manage. You show the little pizza box of, here are all the things that we take care of until we fail, in which case, you're failed as well. But even within that, you're still hiring people to do the networking. If something happens, you have a network blip in Azure because something's slow, you still need network engineers to be able to diagnose the problem, potentially to resolve the problem. And unfortunately, they're more likely to come back to you and say, well, it's not our problem. It's not happening on our network that we control. It's over there. They control it. Open up a ticket and you'll have some level 1 tech respond to you asking you for basic details. And then 24 hours later, we'll upgrade you to a level 2 tech after you yell at the level 1 tech because you're getting absolutely nowhere. And the level 2 tech Googles an article and says, well, have you tried changing the TCP IP stack? Maybe you should install winsock.dll, which old people in this room will know what I'm talking about. They'll know that pain. And that's every one of the providers. Their level 1, level 2 services terrible. How do executives justify these cloud operational costs compared to on-prem, including CapEx? All right. That's a good question. Because in the short term, the fact that it's not CapEx is really neat. Hey, I don't have to go to the board. I don't have to beg for what my hardware is going to look like 4 years from now when I don't know what my hardware requirements will be 4 years from now. So when we go and beg the board, please, sir, may we have another server? We're going to say, what kind of server do you need? I need something that's going to be adequate 4 years from now. So it's going to be 5 times as big as what I need today. And then the board's going to say, well, I'll give you 2.5 times. And we go with 2.5 times. And so it kind of fits. But then for a significant amount of that point in time, we're underutilized. We're underutilizing those servers because we know that we need to hang on to maybe live again. I'm going to put that on mute and make sure. I'm gonna see if I can see myself seeing myself, and it looks like I can see myself seeing myself. So Twitch is back. We're back and running. So yes, thank you, Anders. We are back. Twitch they've gone down twice on me in an hour. I'm wondering if they're using Google Cloud. So what I was going with. So yes, there's a huge benefit to, if you've got the money, we'll give you the hardware, honey. By contrast, if you're buying your own hardware, that's a 6 to 12 month process, depending on the organization you're with. At best, it's a 2 to 4 week process, assuming that everything's in stock and you can get it and rack it and set it up appropriately. But then the bill comes. It's when the bill comes that you say, wow, there is a real cost to convenience. There's a huge cost to convenience. Now, if you're in an organization where convenience is worth the money, then cool. I think for some organizations, though, where convenience is worth the money and you've got essentially unlimited money, they're just going to buy ridiculous amounts of hardware up front and just keep buying hardware if they need it or not. So I'm thinking about like major financials, the major hedge funds, the people who can talk about how many petabytes of data that they have and how many millions of operations they're running per second on servers. And in those scenarios, you just keep buying hardware because it doesn't matter if you need it today or not. You're going to need it sometime, and you're going to need enough hardware. I need new hardware. Boom. I got it right there for you. Set it up. You're running. And you have the converse is for everybody else. And there's a scenario here of, hey, we grew significantly on most servers over the course of a couple of years. And that's something that you may not have been able to do on premises, especially in 2020 when hardware was very difficult to get. Manufacturing of hardware really hit a wall for reasons that I'm not going to talk about on Shop Talk. We're not gonna breach that line, but they hit a wall, and it took 2 years to recover. So most places are okay if they start out with a cloud. Mala says at a certain point in business growth, if you're architected for on-prem and you're set there growth-wise, it's insanely hard to switch. It is because development for being in the cloud very different from development on premises.
Right.
Switch to 12 terabyte environment from on-prem to Azure with 2 weeks notice. Yeah, but you went to virtual machines. So basically you went the easy route that you can do in 2 weeks, but
Right.
is going to cost like 3 times as much.
Uh-huh.
And
We
hey,
have environments like that too, where I am. The
Yeah.
lift and shift moves.
yeah, now
Yeah.
that may be worth it. And if you're moving from like saved about 15K a month, weren't you using somebody else Rackspace or something where you were just getting gouged on server fees?
Not heard of so many people saving on Azure.
This is why. It's because he was using Rackspace.
Yeah, maybe
Storage
that.
fees.
Yeah.
Okay. How dare you store data on your servers? So that all makes sense. Woof, $1,000 per terabyte per month. Shoot, I'm gonna start my own server company if I get $1,000 per terabyte per month, and it probably wasn't even very good storage either. Okay.
This whole redshift thing that we have going is kind of like that. It's a swamp into which you throw money more and more. It's about a couple of million for 11 terabytes,
It's a money
which
pit.
is like beyond. Every time I look at it, this can't be true, but it is.
Yeah, no, it's a proper money pit, and just like the fantastic movie from the 80s. 2 weeks. It's going to take 2 weeks to fix this. Okay, final article. Speaking of money pits, Microsoft is moving Build to San Francisco in 2026. And so Mala and I were talking about this beforehand. I said, okay, well, hey, Microsoft has reportedly canceled all of its hold for Build at the Seattle Convention Center, quote, for all future years, unquote. Now, that might change, but we've seen Ignite. Ignite has gone to Orlando. Ignite has gone to Chicago. It's gone to several other places. It doesn't have to be in Seattle. And Build doesn't have to be in Seattle, although it has been for the last decade. The thing is that apparently in 2026, they're going to San Francisco. Yeah, there we go. No, actually, they didn't say San Francisco. This is where they were for 4 years. So actually, I don't think that they've mentioned where they're going.
Somebody said San Francisco.
Yeah, the only reference to San Fran here is that they had Build in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
2013 through 2016.
Okay.
And it could very well be that in a different article they do mention.
Okay, let me see if I can find something.
But yeah, not in this article either, in the Seattle Medium. So with all the people they've been laying off, they might have room on campus.
Yeah, here it is, Kevin. So it is going to be San Francisco. That is correct. And I will give you the link. 1 second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Breaking news on Shop Talk. All right.
So it's on the Microsoft site itself.
Okay. So they're going back to the Moscone Center, which is where they were in 2020 or 2012 to 2016. Oh, whoops. There we go. Okay, Build. Wait, this is Build 2016.
Oh.
So, breaking news from 2016.
Oh crap.
Why would anyone go to a riot zone? I mean, why would you host it in Seattle in that case? Um, although we were talking about this before stream that yeah, Seattle hasn't been as good as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. San Francisco's a lot worse than it was 10 years ago and way worse than it
Right.
was 30. Um, neither of those. I mean, I get Seattle. Seattle's got enough places, and usually you can keep the rioting at bay for most conferences. Although, based on the article in here in The Verge, um, one of the reasons that they might have moved it is because of protesters. So basically, like we want to go someplace where there aren't going to be as many. But then San Francisco is an interesting choice in that case. San Francisco was a nice place in '73. Yeah, it was a nice place probably until about
Oh
the
yeah, it was a
late
nice
90s.
place even in the early 90s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of mid '90s, Gilmore Girls era, San Francisco. Obviously, the show like that didn't actually exist, but spoilers, people, it wasn't real. But um, at that point in time, up to 2000 to 2005, not a bad place at all, and then just progressively gotten worse over the years. So I don't know. Even the convention centers, the main areas where you're going to draw people in San Francisco, the problem is it's so close to really awful parts of town. And so if you're an attendee, it's kind of look at this side and it's beautiful. Look at this side and it's not a place you want to be. Or if you stay in a hotel that's a mile away from the convention center or from the one of the nicer uh, hosting spots for conferences, you may have to walk through some rough areas. So it's tough.
Last year, the last year at Seattle, which was my time back there after 5 years with COVID in between, seemed a little better than it was 5 years ago.
Hmm,
A little better.
it might
I
be.
don't know. It may be just my perception too. I don't know. I wasn't chased by anyone. There wasn't anybody, being, harassing or anything. Although there were plenty of people on the streets. Um, so it seemed a wee bit better, and so a couple of other people agreed with me, but I don't know.
Yeah. Now, the way you phrase that though just reminds me of like the Cleveland tourism video. Cleveland, we're probably not going to chase you down the streets anymore. By the way, if you have never seen the Cleveland tourism video, everybody, I will end on this. I'm not going to show it because I don't want to get I don't want to get demonetized or anything for all the $0 we're ever going to get. But highly recommend. This is it's 51 seconds long. Just go watch that over the next 51 seconds, and it's hilarious. The Cleveland Tourism Board. So go check that out. With that, we're going to wrap up Shop Talk for the night. So everybody, remember, tomorrow is our in-person meeting. So we'll be in person, personally. Come check us out, meetup.com/TriPass. But until we do see each other, Shop Talk, TriPass meeting on the street someplace, maybe even in Cleveland. Everybody, take care.